Da 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 da. Okay, the first problem is that theme is not in the game. What's going on, everybody? So as the title says, I wanted to make this video at launch, but I wanted to also wait a little bit, a whole year actually, to see what a whole year of consistent support for this apparent live service game looks like. Now looking back, I wish I made the video at launch because nothing's changed. So I want to say right off the bat that I play a lot of games. Like, I don't follow movies too well. I don't know what's going on down the movie TV route outside the MCU. I'm a huge MCU fan, but I don't watch a lot of movies. With games, I followed games from like literally early childhood. I got the Xbox 360, right? And then now I collect consoles, I collect games. I've played almost every major franchise. Like, I mostly focus on single player games, but I also watch a ton of multiplayer games and have an appreciation for this stuff. I own all the consoles. Like, I love VR gaming. Like, gaming's a wonderful place, a wonderful community. There's tons of great games that come out every single year. And man, when they said, all right, we're doing a live service Avengers game, I was like, okay, I could get behind that. If it's done right, if it's done right. I see myself as a normal average gamer that just understands what makes a good game. And I'm here to say and remind people that Avengers is not one of them. Like, this is not a good game, and this is not a good live service game. It's not even a good game. This is a huge disappointment. And I say this as someone that's given the game time, that likes to see things with the benefit of the doubt. I even pay for some of those MCU skins every once in a while, and occasionally come back and play the game just to see if anything's changed for the better. I understand when it's important to put your foot down as well and say no to these companies that like to shoehorn all this money off of you and use an IP like the Avengers in such a terrible way to just milk money out of your pockets. There's gonna be a ton of people. You know what? There's actually not gonna be a ton of people because that community is so small, and they're gonna disagree with this right now because they're literally bowing down to Crystal Dynamics as a studio, Square Enix as a publisher. They're bowing down to the company, and they're like, all right, it's gonna change, it's gonna change, it's gonna change. Like, it's been a year. This game has not changed. Anything that they've released has not looked good. It's not played well. This whole game has just been broken. And I don't mean in bugs, I mean as a game, as an experience. It is not a good game, like, since launch. And like, anyone that tells you otherwise, I feel like a lot of the player base is just hoping this game is going to be the dream, is going to be the next big thing. You look at something like at how well the Avengers has done in the MCU, and just how well the MCU has done. #1 franchise in Hollywood. It should be that for games, and you shouldn't accept anything less than that. Look at Insomniac's Spider-Man. It's beautiful. They release skins literally years later for free because they have that much respect for the fans, right? They released Miles Morales, like, just out of nowhere. They're doing all these awesome things, innovative, pushing the franchise forward and making Spider-Man. It was like, for a long period of time, the #1 bestseller on PlayStation, because that's exactly what every Marvel game should be. I have yet to see a future where Marvel takes over the gaming community like they've done with movies, because they deserve to. They literally, they have shown that that's possible in movies. So, like, why can't we do that in games? And that's because they're too focused on the money, and they're not focused enough on creating a good, enjoyable experience that many people around the world are going to love. They're too focused on the IP. Like, they're not focused enough on making a good game. And I think that that's what's caused Avengers to really suffer, is they thought it was going to be a hit no matter what they put out. And at first, it kind of was. So many people bought it, but just because it had Avengers on the box. But after like an hour of playing it, many people dropped it. So I'm someone that I understand the business mindset, and I understand the desire to capitalize on something as crazy as the Avengers, but you have to do it right. And I'm not going to respect a company that doesn't do that. I'm not going to bow down to them and hope that things will change. And this isn't harassment. This is a consumer company relationship. The consumer, people need to remember, you guys have the power. You guys vote with your wallets. Like, it doesn't matter what you say. The company is an entity. The people that work for them choose to work for them. This is not harassment to like the people or anything like that. This is about the product that they have released, that they are asking you to pay $60 for, right? I hope it's still not $60, but that's what people need to remember. Like, just, I know it's 2022 and everybody loves to like be nice to each other, but it is what it is. You have to put your foot down sometimes, and this is one of those times. Crystal Dynamics, I think they made Tomb Raider before. I love Tomb Raider. I've played all the games, and then first off, why are they even a fit for Avengers? They make single player games, so unless they were deciding to make Avengers a single player experience, they were never going to succeed in making a live service game. There's so many areas that I think that Crystal Dynamics could have addressed even after launch to really maybe not save the game, but at least enhance it to kind of make it a better quality product. But for whatever reason, they're just not thinking about it. And then that makes me wonder, are these really the same people that made Tomb Raider? Those were excellent, well thought out games, and it seems like with Avengers, there's no thought, and there's still no thought, and it's just weird. This isn't just a Crystal Dynamics problem. This is like we all know there's tons of franchises out there that are moving towards the live service model, and any gamer like myself is going to tell the industry right now in videos like this that this is not going to work out. Like these games are going to fail because no one wants it at the end of the day. Like people are busy. Not everybody has hundreds of hours to grind in a game, and if that grind especially isn't worth it, like in Avengers, then it's not going to lead anywhere. Before I get into the meat as to why I think Marvel's Avengers has failed, wanted to also describe that yes, I played the game for probably more hours than it deserved when it first launched. Since then, definitely not. Every expansion that has come out, I don't even level up these characters anymore. I just kind of play through, and there's like an hour or two of content, and you can't level up anything in that time. And if there's no content, what's the point of leveling up? So it's just, eventually I gave up. I paid for some skins at first when they started doing the MCU stuff, and now that's all that they release. There's no content, there's no roadmap. There's just announcements that a roadmap is constantly coming, but it never comes, and when it does come, it's always something that nobody wants. That's been the case for like half a year now. And they're releasing regular MCU skins. I swear I see a notification on Twitter like every single week where there's a new MCU skin, and then they post like these quotes with the skins on Twitter from the movies that aren't even very good quotes. Like they like mess up the quotes from the movies, and it's just the lack of like care and thought to this process is just so messed up. There's a really awesome video out there where they analyze the whole Spider-Man Fortnite versus like Marvel's Avengers gameplay style, and it's so sad to see the lack of effort that they put into Spider-Man. It's like, how do you even get that wrong? Especially when you have a studio like Insomniac, you can just call up and really just learn things from, and then do it at least in the same way. So I came back, I played every single expansion. I've spent a decent amount of time with many of these characters, especially the base ones, and Black Panther specifically. And then I'm pretty up to date on the game. So this is coming from someone that's pretty well informed about the game. I've watched some videos, I play the game, play the expansions, played the story twice. I feel that I definitely have a say when it comes to why this game failed, and I kind of wanted to describe my opinions on why this failed, and hopefully how another studio, whoever gets the Avengers IP next, can avoid some of these failures. So here it is, all the problems I think that are the reason that Marvel's Avengers has failed. First being the online cash grab repetitive model. Let's be honest, no one wanted this. Like, the rewards were not worth it. There's like these like things that you get, like ISOs and like gear pieces and all this. No one wants gear for the Avengers in the first place. That's not a system anyone wanted. I remember when they first showed this in like, I think it was 2019 E3. No one was excited about it. There was so much hate. I tried to stay optimistic about it, but even I wasn't too excited about leveling up Avengers. There's no content, and then there's this model where they're constantly making you pay for stuff, and that leads into another point, is they're taking advantage of the remaining player base. I feel like they know this game's like just gone now, and they're trying to just milk whoever's still playing it, and I feel so bad for those people that are still paying for the MCU skins and doing all that. Because they're releasing, like I said, like a new MCU skin almost every week, and that's the only skins they're releasing. There's no comic skins or anything anymore, because they know people are going to buy it because everybody loves the MCU. First, I was like, Crystal Dynamics could at least improve the game. Now I think that they're incapable because they just don't understand what people want, and two, they don't have a heart. They just like release skins, and they're putting all their effort into skins, these microtransactions that nobody wants. The gameplay, super repetitive. The missions, super repetitive. The base game, the single player story, didn't even focus on the title characters and isn't even replayable. I replayed it a second time. First time I actually really liked the story. The second time, a story is only as in games, a story is only as good as like the second or third time you play through it. The second time, I was bored out of my mind. There were only like 2 key moments that I was like really into, but even then, it was not the same. It was just so boring. They didn't even let you replay the story until like months after launch, and that was the only single player thing there was to do in the game, right? Because no one wants to go jump into all these war zones and all this stuff by yourself or with random people. There's no even random people playing it. Unless you have friends that own the game, you're most likely not playing online because it's boring. No one's out there. There was no matchmaking. Matchmaking is just very hard in the game because no one's playing it. And then again, like I said, no focus on the characters. Who wanted to play as Kamala Khan? Like, nobody. When the Avengers was first announced, no one wanted to play as Kamala Khan. And then most of the game you play as her, and that just destroys the experience. I understand in the multiplayer and all this stuff, the major component, the live service component, you play as all the Avengers and the new heroes and all this stuff. But the single player campaign should have never been from Kamala's perspective. And it just, I think, ruined the whole thing, ruined the experience, and it just made it such a weird, ungenuine experience for many players. All of this brings me into one major point that I really want to touch on, is that the expansions, what expansions? Like, they've added a new hero, great, with their own moveset, great, for gameplay that already sucks, great, but they never added any new content, with the exception of maybe the Wakanda one. All the other ones, there's no new, like, whatever they call it, biomes or missions or war zones or any of this stuff. These expansions aren't coming out fast enough. I understand the game failed. I understand they didn't have the capacity that they thought they did, and that it took them way longer than they thought to support this game. I understand that. However, that's not our problem as gamers. We were promised regular content in a supposed live service Avengers game, and we've gotten, I think, at most 3 or 4 expansions since launch, and none of them have been quality at all. They've all been really, really poor stories that feel like they've been written by a 2-year-old. You've had all these like new missions that were in the same exact missions or war zones or environments that the base game was in, so there was obviously laziness there. And then not only that, but a lot of this content, including the Wakanda stuff, it felt like a lot of this was locked off, especially some of these events that they do, which I'll touch on that in a second. But these are locked off for the lower power level players. So you have to get to like whatever the max was like 130, 150. And then they like up the max now, but nobody's playing the game. So there's no content. There's no reason to level up. The only people that are leveling up are people that have no lives and are just playing it for the sake of playing it. And they're just grinding to level up every character for the sake of grinding. There's no in-game reason for it besides being forced to have to level up to play some of these things that aren't even fun. Like, there's these raids that have launched, which I heard are very buggy, and that, apparently are hours long. You can play them with friends, and that's great, but only if your friends are playing it. And then 2, they're very buggy. So what if you're like all this way in and then it crashes? You have to start all over again. So it is clear that Crystal Dynamics was not ready to tackle a live service game. Whether this was successful at launch or not, this plan did not work. The expansions didn't, if they were at least going to be this poor quality, they should have at least supported, they should have had more expansions, because I don't understand how you could spend this much time on content that looks like no effort was put into it. And if it was, then you're making games wrong, because that's clearly, there's no new content for the players. There's nothing besides grind, and that, in my mind, is not that hard to create. And then the events, like they had this like Red Room thing and all these other events that they had or whatever. I've never played a single one. I've like watched them. They don't last long enough, which is why I never played them. People are busy. They're not going to jump into Marvel's Avengers when there's all these other either things to play or just things to do. And then they take these events away, which I heard that they recently brought a lot of them back. But they take them away. There's time-limited events, which to me don't make sense in a game that's dead. This game is dead. There's like 5 people probably playing in the whole world. But if you're already starving for content, just leave the events in. Who cares about this time-limited stuff like Fortnite and everything else is doing? The difference is those games have a giant player base, and they're going to keep showing up because this is quality content. With Avengers, these events aren't even quality. The game itself isn't quality. You have no player base, and it's just, there's a huge disconnect between what Crystal Dynamics is thinking versus what the players want. So then I have 3 small last things that I think are worth pointing out, other problems that kind of feed into why I think Marvel's Avengers just flopped as much as it did. 1, Spider-Man being a console exclusive for an already dead game. We already talked about how bad Spider-Man was as a character in the game. There's no story, first off, for such a big character, so this whole thing was not even worth getting. Many people probably bought a PS5 to play this on just so they could play as Spider-Man. Thankfully, you have access to Insomniac Spider-Man now, but in Avengers, that gameplay sucks, and it's locked off for one console in a game that's already starving for content. You're not providing that content to the other players that got a raid that's like half buggy, and frankly they probably have no one to play it with because no one's playing Avengers. Okay, so that's a big problem. And then one kind of nitpick issue is the faces. All right, a lot of people have also pointed this out, so I know it's not just me, but when I look at these faces and I even hear the voices, these are not the Avengers. Like, this is a huge problem, and I think that I love the Guardians of the Galaxy game, for example. Like, that was a great game, but both Square Enix titles, they're creating games for IPs, Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers, that right now the public is not ready to really accept new faces and new designs and all this stuff. Like, the MCU is what we know, right? It's not like Spider-Man where you can reboot the character every few years in games and we're all willing to accept the new face, right? Except now there's some controversy on that new Insomniac face. With Avengers, we were never on board with these faces from the get-go. We don't resonate with them. We don't know who these are. We don't care about these Avengers. We have no idea what they've been through, right? At least if you're going to give us new versions of the Avengers that aren't the movie versions, then you're going to have to do the work and tell the backstory, and instead of starting us off in some weird dystopian kind of future that no one really cared about from a story perspective in the first place. And then there's like I said at the beginning, the original Avengers theme isn't even in the game, so that's tough because even with the Star Wars Lego games, you have the Star Wars theme. So it's like, dude, like, if you're making a big IP like the Avengers, you better have money to fork over to get the likeness of the actors and the theme. That's just the reality of it. Like, I guarantee if this was set in the MCU, or even just like based off the MCU, like an offshoot or something, like a multiverse world or something like that, still use the actors' faces, still use the theme, it would have been so much better of an experience, even with such shitty gameplay and a shitty idea of making a live service Avengers game. And that brings me to the final point as to why, above all else, Avengers has failed. No one at Crystal Dynamics seems to be taking responsibility, and they seem to be blaming the community. Like, the community just doesn't understand it. They're just not understanding how much pressure the studio was in. I think I saw the head of the studio or somebody on Twitter say that people just don't understand how much pressure we were under to create something around some of the biggest characters ever created and still make it fun. No one cares. No one wants to hear that. We're consumers at the end of the day. We want a good product. Insomniac took Spider-Man, honestly, more beloved in my opinion than the Avengers, and Insomniac still delivered. They were under pressure, but they still figured it out. They didn't make excuses. They didn't make excuses and then blame the community. There's no excuses. Like, they just come out and say, yes, we messed up. But no one seems to be saying that. They seem to be saying, yes, we understand this game is going to get better, though. That's all they say. But it never gets better. There doesn't seem to be any talk of improvement. Instead, there's more microtransactions. They're milking you for your money. And what little respect I had for the studio and many other consumers, we now see that this is one of the shadiest studios that I've ever seen work on a Marvel IP. Like, I'd rather have Activision work on Avengers, because even their Spider-Man games were better than Marvel's Avengers. So, at the end of the day, it is what it is. These were the biggest reasons why I think Marvel's Avengers kind of failed. Hopefully one day Crystal Dynamics learns their lesson, but either way, I don't want the IP with them anymore, and I think Marvel doesn't either. So one day, I feel like right now they're just publicly supporting them because they have to, but in a year, this game's going to be dead. Some other studio will announce that they're working on Avengers, and I'm sure that they will learn the lessons, because there's plenty of more talented game studios out there that are worthy of the Avengers name, and that'll give it a lot more respect and love that all the fans, that all of us, that we deserve. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, Square Enix, make a second one. Great game. Not gonna make a video on that, but that was a great game. Expand it. Do whatever you want. I think you guys have a great foundation for that. And I think that was a separate studio, so good work. It's not a Square Enix issue. It's purely Crystal Dynamics. Anyways, y'all, that's the video. I think this is the first like nerdy kind of gaming video I've made. I mostly focus on professional, personal development content and topics on this channel. So definitely let me know if you'd like to see more of this. I like to put some of these up every now and then, kind of share my voice and my opinions on some of the things that I really love within the gaming community, and also movies I like and stuff like that. But overall, just smash that like button, really show some of that support. Let's get this video trending higher than the amount of people that are playing Marvel's Avengers right now at this second. Hold on, I think there's probably only 20 in the entire world, so scratch that. Please subscribe if even a fraction of my videos resonate with you, and I'll see everybody in the next one. Peace out.